Fix this engine before sunrise, and I'll marry you myself. General Sterling's challenge hung over Hangar 4 as more than 40 people fell silent. Marcus Reed calmly opened his tool roll. Beside the modern tools lay a scarred 7/16-inch wrench stamped ER, one jaw ground strangely thin. Dawn was closing in. Sterling thought she had trapped a recruit, but that old wrench pointed toward a truth that could turn the whole hangar against her. Rain hammered the steel roof of Hangar 4 hard enough to sound like handfuls of gravel thrown from the dark North Carolina sky. Beneath the white maintenance lights, the fighter aircraft sat motionless with its engine bay open, surrounded by cables, diagnostic carts, toolboxes, and exhausted technicians. Water streamed down the enormous hangar doors at Redstone Air Training Center outside Fayetteville. Beyond them, runway lights blurred through the storm. Inside, more than 40 officers, mechanics, and civilian contractors had spent hours staring at a problem none of them could explain. Marcus Reed was listening to it. The 24-year-old black recruit stood near the open engine bay with his head tilted slightly, one hand resting at his side. His uniform was clean, but plainly worn from work. His boots had been polished that morning, though long hours on the hangar floor had already dulled them. He wasn't touching anything. He was simply listening. A few feet away, diagnostic screens glowed with columns of numbers. Technicians spoke quietly over one another. Someone rolled a cart across the concrete. Marcus raised his hand. "Could you stop that cart for a second?" The technician looked at him. "What?" "The cart, please." The wheels stopped. Marcus leaned slightly toward the aircraft. There. For less than a second, he heard it again. Not a grinding sound. Not a knock. Nothing dramatic enough to make another mechanic turn his head. Two faint metallic notes, close together. Then silence. Marcus stepped nearer. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice cut through Hangar 4. Every conversation stopped. Brigadier General Rebecca Sterling walked toward him. At 49, Sterling carried herself with the hard precision of someone accustomed to rooms changing when she entered them. Her uniform looked untouched by the long night. Her silver star caught the overhead light as polished boots struck the concrete. Marcus immediately stepped away from the aircraft. "Ma'am." Sterling looked from him to the exposed engine. "Did anyone authorize you to work on this aircraft?" "No, ma'am. I wasn't working on it." "Then why are you standing there?" "I heard something." A few technicians looked up. Sterling stared at him. You heard something?" "Yes, ma'am." "What exactly did you hear, Recruit Reed?" Marcus hesitated. Not because he lacked an answer, but because he recognized the tone. He had heard that tone before. It wasn't a question asked because someone wanted information. It was an invitation to make him look foolish. "Still," he answered. "A metallic double note during the shutdown cycle. Very faint. It didn't sound consistent with the fault they're tracking." Silence followed. Then Sterling gave a short laugh. "Of course." Marcus said nothing. She stepped closer. "Our senior maintenance personnel have been working this problem for hours. We have diagnostic equipment worth more than most houses, engineers with decades of experience, and technical data coming out of every system on that aircraft." Her eyes moved down to Marcus's boots and back to his face, but Recruit Reed heard something. A few nervous chuckles came from behind her. Marcus felt them more sharply than he wanted to admit. He kept his hands relaxed. "Ma'am, I'm only saying the sound may be worth checking." "Worth checking." Sterling turned toward the assembled personnel. "Did everybody hear that? Apparently, we've been approaching this all wrong." Nobody answered. "We don't need the diagnostic team. We don't need the engineers. We just need Recruit Reed to stand beside the airplane and listen." More laughter this time. "Not much. Enough." Marcus looked past Sterling. Master Sergeant Daniel Brooks stood near a diagnostic cart. 52 years old, experienced enough to know the difference between discipline and humiliation. Their eyes met. For half a second, Marcus thought Brooks might speak. Brooks looked down at the tablet in his hands. That hurt more than the laughter. Sterling moved closer until only a few feet separated them. You've been here what, 3 months? Yes, ma'am. And you've completed advanced engine diagnostics? No, ma'am. Specialized propulsion training? No, ma'am. Then perhaps there's a reason you're assigned to inventory and basic maintenance instead of standing where the qualified people stand. Marcus swallowed. He could feel every face in Hangar 4 turned toward him. Some looked uncomfortable, some curious. A few seemed entertained. Nobody said a word. Marcus had learned something about public humiliation. Anger offered temporary relief, but when the person humiliating you held enough power, anger could become evidence against you. Raise your voice and you were aggressive. Defend yourself too forcefully and you were insubordinate. Walk away and they called you weak. So Marcus did the hardest thing. He remained still. Understood, ma'am. Something about his calmness seemed to irritate Sterling more than an argument would have. She glanced toward the crippled aircraft. The following morning's Allied readiness demonstration had turned the hangar into a pressure cooker. Senior officials were expected. Careers were exposed. Redstone's reputation was on the line, and the aircraft behind her remained grounded. Sterling looked back at Marcus. You really believe you know something they don't? Marcus chose his words carefully. I believe I heard something that deserves another look. Sterling smiled. It wasn't warm. All right. Brooks finally lifted his head. General, Sterling raised one hand. No, Master Sergeant. Let's hear the recruit. She turned so the entire hangar could see her. Sure. You think you can fix it, Reed? I didn't say that, ma'am. But you think you know better than the people who couldn't. No, ma'am. I said I heard something. The distinction should have ended the conversation. Instead, Sterling's smile widened. Then let's make this interesting. Marcus saw Brooks stiffen. Laura Bennett, a 58-year-old chief warrant officer standing near the far workbench, slowly lowered the maintenance report she had been reading. Sterling raised her voice. Fix this engine before sunrise and I'll marry you myself. The words carried from one end of Hangar 4 to the other. For a moment, nobody reacted. Then someone laughed. Another person joined in. A few others followed with the strained laughter people used when someone powerful had decided something was funny. Marcus didn't smile. Sterling continued. I'll make it easy for you. You solved the mystery our trained personnel haven't solved. And perhaps we'll discover Redstone's been wasting its money on qualifications all these years. The laughter faded. This time the silence felt different. People knew she had gone too far. Marcus could see it in their faces. Nobody stopped her. Not Brooks. Not the officers. Not the contractors who had watched Marcus spend weeks moving equipment and cleaning work areas while other recruits received technical assignments. 40 people. 40 opportunities for one voice to say enough. Rain beat against the roof. Marcus bent down, not in surrender. He began gathering the few personal tools he had brought to the work area. He laid them carefully across a faded canvas roll. A flashlight, a measuring gauge, several sockets, and an old 7/16-inch wrench. It looked out of place among the newer tools. The steel was scarred and darkened with age. One jaw had been ground slightly thinner than the other, as though someone long ago had needed it to fit somewhere a normal wrench couldn't reach. Near the handle were 2 stamped letters. E.R. Marcus ran his thumb over them once. Across the hangar, Laura Bennett noticed. Her gaze stayed on the wrench longer than it should have. Then Sterling spoke again. What's wrong, Reed? Challenge too difficult now that everyone is watching? Marcus slowly rolled the canvas closed. He thought about walking away. It would have been reasonable. Nobody could blame a 24-year-old recruit for refusing to gamble his future against a general who had already decided what he was worth. Then Marcus looked at the aircraft. He thought about the sound. 2 faint metallic notes. He thought about the pilot who had brought the machine home. And he thought about whoever might climb into another cockpit after somebody cleared a warning without understanding why it had appeared. Marcus looked toward Brooks. "Master Sergeant." Brooks seemed surprised to hear his name. "Reed, if you authorize me to assist under your supervision, I'll take another look." Sterling folded her arms. "Assist?" Marcus turned toward her. "Yes, ma'am. This isn't a game, and that aircraft isn't mine to experiment on. If Master Sergeant Brooks authorizes the work, I'll follow procedure." The last traces of amusement disappeared from several faces. Marcus wasn't accepting Sterling's humiliation. He was accepting responsibility. Brooks looked at the aircraft, then at Sterling, then back at the young recruit everyone had been willing to laugh at. Marcus waited. Sterling's expression tightened. "Well?" Brooks still hadn't answered. Marcus slipped the old wrench back inside his tool roll. For an instant, Laura Bennett's eyes followed it. Something about those two letters had unsettled her. Marcus didn't notice. He was listening again, past the rain, past the ventilation fans, past the uncomfortable breathing of 40 silent witnesses. In his memory was another sound, older and warmer. Tools touching concrete in an Alabama garage and a man's patient voice reminding him never to confuse noise with truth. Marcus looked once more at the dead aircraft. Then he said quietly, "If I'm wrong, we'll know soon enough." Brooks studied him. "And if you're right?" Marcus's eyes remained on the engine. "Then we need to know before somebody flies it again." Outside, thunder rolled across the runway. Inside Hangar 4, nobody laughed. And before that night was over, the battered wrench hidden inside Marcus Reed's tool roll would force some of the most powerful people at Redstone to confront a truth they had spent years refusing to see. By the time Marcus Reed left Redstone that evening, the rain had settled into a steady gray curtain over Fayetteville. He drove east with both hands on the wheel of his aging pickup, watching red brake lights smear across the wet windshield. The windshield wipers clicked back and forth with a tired rhythm. His canvas tool roll rested on the passenger seat. He had not touched it since leaving Hangar 4. He didn't need to. He could still see the faces, some amused, some embarrassed, most silent. 40 people had stood beneath those white lights while a general turned him into entertainment. And what stayed with Marcus wasn't Rebecca Sterling's voice. It was everyone else's absence. Nobody had said enough. Nobody had even said his name. At a red light, Marcus loosened his grip on the steering wheel and flexed his fingers. He had been holding it too tightly. He heard Sterling again. "Fix this engine before sunrise, and I'll marry you myself." The light turned green. Marcus drove on. Eastwood looked different from Redstone, even though only a stretch of highway separated them. The broad roads narrowed. Chain restaurants gave way to laundromats, repair shops, churches, discount stores, and brick apartment buildings darkened by years of Carolina rain. A city bus groaned away from a curb as two adult workers in reflective jackets hurried beneath an awning. At the corner of Mason and Bell, a faded red sign buzzed above a neighborhood grocery, Mason's Market. Marcus lived upstairs. The apartment wasn't much. One bedroom, narrow kitchen, a radiator that complained every winter. The floors sloped slightly toward the back wall, and whenever the bus stopped outside, the drinking glasses in his cupboard gave a faint little rattle. But it was his. Almost losing it 2 years earlier had taught him not to take that for granted. Marcus parked behind the market and climbed the exterior stairs. Before he reached the landing, a voice called from below. "Marcus?" He turned. Arthur Reed stood beneath the awning, holding a brown grocery bag against his chest. At 71, Arthur was lean and straight-backed, despite 4 decades around machine shops. His hands carried the permanent evidence of that life. Thick fingers, pale scars, dark lines around the nails that no amount of soap had ever completely erased. "You planning to stand in the rain all night?" Arthur asked. Marcus managed to smile. "Was thinking about it." "Bad plan." Arthur climbed the stairs. Inside, Marcus switched on a small lamp. Warm yellow light spread across second-hand furniture and framed photographs. Nothing matched, but everything had a purpose. Arthur set the groceries on the counter. "You eat?" "Not yet." That wasn't the question. Marcus opened the refrigerator. "I was getting there." Arthur studied him. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one read men get when somebody says something stupid and we decide pretending it didn't bother us makes us noble." Marcus stopped, with one hand on the refrigerator door. Arthur waited. Marcus finally took out a bottle of water. "General Sterling embarrassed me in front of the hangar." Arthur's expression didn't change. "How?" Marcus told him. Not every word. He didn't repeat all of Sterling's remarks about his credentials or Eastwood. He didn't need to. Arthur had lived long enough to understand what kind of contempt could hide behind words like qualified, appropriate, and standards. But Marcus repeated the challenge exactly. Arthur slowly lowered himself into a kitchen chair. "She said she'd marry you? Apparently I'm quite a catch if I can repair a fighter engine." Arthur almost smiled. Almost. And everybody laughed? Some did. The others? Marcus twisted the cap from his water. They didn't do anything. That answer seemed to hurt Arthur more. He looked toward the rain-streaked window. Silence can make a crowded room feel mighty lonely. Marcus didn't answer. He knew something about loneliness. Before Redstone, before the uniform, he had worked civilian maintenance for an industrial equipment company outside Montgomery. He had been good at it. Good enough that supervisors sent difficult problems his way when production stopped. Then came a restructuring. Marcus watched less experienced workers move into permanent technical positions, while his own responsibilities quietly disappeared. The official explanation had been organizational fit. Marcus remembered standing in a conference room while a manager praised his work ethic and explained why there was no longer a place for him. 6 weeks later, he was behind on rent. 2 months later, an eviction notice appeared on his door. Arthur had offered money. Marcus refused it. Instead, he worked nights, repaired equipment wherever he could, and eventually entered military service believing the uniform might offer something civilian life had not. A system with rules, scores, standards, something measurable, something fair. 3 months at Redstone had begun teaching him a harder lesson. A fair rule meant little if the person controlling the opportunity had already decided who deserved it. Marcus looked toward his canvas tool roll. Arthur followed his eyes. "You taking that back tonight?" "Yeah." Marcus unrolled it on the table to check the contents. The scarred 7/16-inch wrench appeared between newer tools. Arthur reached toward it but stopped short of touching it. His face softened. "Still carrying Elias with you?" Marcus ran his thumb across the stamped letters. "ER. Every day." Arthur nodded. He didn't explain. Neither did Marcus. Some memories needed time before they were ready to become words. A phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus checked it. "Helen Carter." He answered immediately. "Miss Helen?" "Marcus, honey, I hate bothering you." "You're not bothering me. My car won't start." "Where are you?" "Community kitchen." Marcus looked at the clock. "Shoot, you alone?" "No. Frank from evening cleanup is still here. He's 68 and thinks that makes him security." Arthur could hear Helen through the phone and shook his head affectionately. Marcus reached for his jacket. "Stay inside. I'll be there in 10 minutes. You don't have to come out in this weather." 10 minutes. He hung up. Arthur looked at him. "You've got an aircraft waiting. I've also got Helen waiting in a parking lot. You could call her a tow truck." "I could." Marcus picked up the tool roll. Arthur smiled faintly. "But you won't." "No." The Eastwood Community Kitchen occupied an old brick storefront beside a laundromat and across from a bus stop. Warm light filled its front windows. Through the glass, Marcus could see stainless steel counters, stacked chairs, and rows of containers prepared for the next day's meals. Helen Carter stood beneath the awning when Marcus arrived. At 63, she carried herself with the brisk energy of someone who had spent years solving other people's emergencies before acknowledging her own. "You're supposed to be doing important military things," she said. "This is important. My battery's probably dead. Let's find out." Rain tapped against the raised hood while Marcus worked by flashlight. Helen held an umbrella over him. "You know I'll pay you." "No, you won't." "Marcus." "Miss Helen," she sighed. "You are as stubborn as your uncle. Arthur says that's hereditary." The battery wasn't dead. A corroded connection had loosened enough to interrupt current. Marcus cleaned it, tightened the terminal, and had Helen try the ignition. The engine turned over immediately. Helen laughed. "That sound is worth $50. Marcus closed the hood. "Then keep the 50 and buy food for tomorrow." Her smile faded into something gentler. "You all right?" Marcus looked at her. "Why?" "You fixed my car without making 3 jokes. That's how I know something's wrong." He glanced toward the glowing windows of the kitchen. Inside were refrigerators he had repaired, an oven he'd rebuilt after a failed heating element, and shelves he had reinforced when Helen couldn't afford replacement units. Nobody there had ever asked where Marcus went to school before trusting his hands. Nobody had asked what rank he held. They simply knew that when something broke, he came. "Long night," he said. Helen didn't press. Instead, she squeezed his shoulder. "Well, whatever room you're walking back into, don't let anybody make you forget who walked into it." Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded. He drove Helen home through the rain and waited until she reached her front door before pulling away. When he returned to the apartment, Arthur was still there. Marcus changed into a clean undershirt, washed his face, and repacked his tools. Arthur watched from the kitchen. "Marcus." "Yeah?" "You don't owe anybody proof that you're a man." Marcus stopped. "I know." "Do you?" Marcus looked toward the old wrench. "This isn't about proving something to Sterling." "Then what's it about?" For several seconds, the only sound was the bus outside releasing its brakes. Marcus remembered the metallic double note. He remembered the crippled aircraft under the lights, and he remembered the adult pilot who had already brought it home once. "If that engine is telling them something they aren't hearing," Marcus said, "somebody needs to listen before they put another person behind it." Arthur's eyes settled on him. There it was, the reason Marcus would return. Not pride, not the marriage joke, not revenge, responsibility. Marcus closed the tool roll. Arthur looked again at the worn wrench hidden inside. Elias would understand. Marcus's hand paused on the buckle. For the first time that night, the humiliation in Hangar 4 seemed to loosen its grip on him. "That's what I'm hoping." He pulled on his jacket and headed downstairs. Behind him, Mason's Market buzzed beneath its red neon sign. Ahead, the highway toward Redstone disappeared into rain. Marcus did not know whether Daniel Brooks would actually let him near the aircraft. He did not know whether the strange sound meant anything. He didn't even know whether Sterling had made her challenge expecting him to return. But he knew one thing. The wrench-marked ER was going back to Hangar 4 with him, and there was one person at Redstone who had already seen it. Laura Bennett had recognized something. Marcus just didn't know what. By the time he returned to Redstone, the rain had thinned to a cold mist that hung above the runway lights like smoke. Hangar 4 was brighter than the night outside, all white fluorescence and polished concrete, with the disabled aircraft still sitting in the center of the floor beneath open panels and suspended maintenance lamps. Marcus stepped through the side entrance, carrying his canvas tool roll. The mood had changed. The crowd from earlier was gone, but the story had not disappeared with them. 2 mechanics near the tool cage looked up when Marcus entered. One nudged the other. A civilian contractor glanced at Marcus, then at his phone, then quickly away. The marriage challenge had already become base gossip. Marcus kept walking. Master Sergeant Daniel Brooks stood at a diagnostic station reviewing a maintenance log. His shoulders looked heavier than they had 2 hours earlier. Marcus stopped several feet away. "Master Sergeant." Brooks looked up. "You came back." "Yes, Sergeant." Brooks seemed to study that answer. "You didn't have to. I said I'd try if you authorized it." Brooks lowered the tablet. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Brooks said, "Before we get anywhere near that engine, there are some things you need to understand." Marcus waited. "You're not touching a panel, connector, control surface, or engine component unless I approve it. You follow technical orders. You work under supervision. If I tell you to stop, you stop. Understood? And if you think this is about winning some contest with General Sterling, you can turn around now." Marcus shook his head. "It isn't." Brooks looked toward the aircraft. "No? No, Sergeant." "Then why are you here?" Marcus thought of Captain Emily Carter bringing the aircraft home through an unexplained failure. He thought about the double note buried beneath the normal shutdown whine. "Because the engine did something nobody understands yet." Brooks stared at him for another second. Then he nodded toward a bench. "Set your tools there." Marcus crossed the floor. Laura Bennett was standing beside the maintenance record station. At 58, Chief Warrant Officer Bennett had the kind of calm authority that did not need volume. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore reading glasses low on her nose as she compared two sets of technical documents. Marcus placed his canvas roll on the bench. Laura's eyes dropped toward it, just for an instant. Then back to Marcus. "Your read." "Yes, ma'am. I've seen your name before." Marcus waited for her to explain. She didn't. Instead, she asked, "What were you studying in the records room last Tuesday at 2310? Marcus blinked. "Engine trend reports." "Why?" "I'd finished inventory early." "That wasn't what I asked." Marcus understood. Because the fault histories are easier to understand when you can see how one symptom changes over time. Laura watched him closely. "Who told you to study them?" "No one." "Who gave you access?" "They're approved maintenance training materials, ma'am. I checked with Sergeant Brooks before I started." Brooks looked down at the tablet in his hand. Laura turned toward him. "You knew?" "Yes." "And you didn't think it was unusual that an inventory recruit was staying 2 hours after shift reading propulsion trend reports?" Brooks shifted his weight. "I thought it showed initiative. Apparently not enough initiative to earn him a training slot." Silence. Marcus felt the air change. Brooks looked at Laura. "Chief, how many advanced diagnostic rotations has Reed received since he arrived?" Brooks didn't answer immediately. Laura waited. "None," he finally said. Marcus looked at him. He already knew the answer, but hearing it spoken aloud felt different. Laura removed her glasses. "His entrance technical scores?" Brooks's jaw tightened. "Top 5% in diagnostic reasoning. Mechanical systems? Top 10. Fault isolation?" Brooks hesitated. "Highest in his intake group." Laura's eyes hardened slightly. Marcus stared at the aircraft. Not at either of them. There were things a person could know privately and still hope were accidental. Bad timing, limited slots, scheduling, someone else getting selected once, then twice, then again. But numbers had a way of stripping excuses down to the frame. Laura asked, "So why is he doing tool inventory?" Brooks looked toward Marcus. It was the wrong place to look. Marcus wished he hadn't, because in Brooks's face he saw something worse than hostility. He saw guilt. "I don't assign the rotations," Brooks said. "No," Laura replied. "But you supervise the people who receive them." Brooks lowered his voice. "Oh, Chief, this isn't the time." Laura glanced toward the dead aircraft. I'd say it's exactly the time. Marcus stepped in before the conversation could go further. Ma'am, I don't need this discussed for my sake. Laura turned toward him. That's the problem, Reed. Marcus said nothing. You've spent 3 months making yourself easy to ignore. The words landed harder than Sterling's mockery because Laura did not say them cruelly. Marcus looked down. With respect, ma'am, I've been doing the assignments I was given. I know. Laura's voice softened. And you've been doing them well enough that people can pretend there's nothing wrong. Across the hangar, a maintenance cart rattled over a seam in the concrete. Marcus remembered his first week at Redstone. 3 recruits had been selected for an advanced propulsion orientation. Marcus had scored higher than 2 of them. Sterling had looked at the list and replaced his name. He had told himself there would be another opportunity. 2 weeks later came a diagnostic workshop. Again, his name disappeared. Then a manufacturer-led systems course. Then an engine teardown observation. Each time there was an explanation. Operational needs, experience requirements, command discretion. Each explanation, taken alone, sounded reasonable. Together they had become a wall. Marcus had responded the only way he knew how. He learned anyway. Technical manuals during meal breaks, maintenance histories after shift, training videos in his apartment above Mason's Market. Questions asked carefully enough not to sound like challenges. And when nobody invited him into the room, he studied what he could through the doorway. A door opened at the far end of Hangar 4. Rebecca Sterling entered. The room seemed to straighten around her. Her gaze found Marcus immediately. Well, she walked toward them. Our volunteer came back. Marcus stood at attention. Yes, ma'am. Sterling noticed Laura, then Brooks. Chief Bennett, Master Sergeant. General, Laura replied. Sterling looked at the documents spread across the station. I hope nobody is confusing tonight's little performance with an actual change in Reed's responsibilities. Brooks said carefully, General, we're reviewing his qualifications before I decide what participation is appropriate. Sterling laughed once. Qualifications? Her eyes returned to Marcus. Did we discover some since dinner? Marcus felt the familiar heat rise behind his ribs. He kept his face neutral. Sterling picked up a personnel tablet from the desk and tapped through several pages. Recruit Reed has no advanced propulsion certification, no manufacturer specialization, no formal diagnostic assignment, no supervised teardown experience on this platform. She lowered the tablet. That's not discrimination. That's a resume. Laura's expression remained still. His test scores are exceptional. Tests measure how well someone takes tests. His after-hours work suggests more than that. Sterling looked at her. Chief, are we seriously debating whether a recruit who's been here 3 months should be treated like a senior engine specialist because he reads manuals after bedtime? Marcus spoke before Laura could. No, ma'am. Sterling turned. He continued. Nobody needs to treat me like anything I'm not. Good. I'd just like the chance to show Master Sergeant Brooks what I heard. Sterling's mouth tightened. And there it is. What, ma'am? The assumption that your instinct deserves the same weight as trained expertise. Marcus chose his next words slowly. No, ma'am. I'm asking for my observation to be checked against the data. For several seconds, Sterling simply stared at him. Marcus could feel Brooks watching. Laura, too. He knew what the moment demanded. Not anger, not submission, precision. Sterling stepped closer. You're very careful with your words, Reed. Yes, ma'am. Why? Marcus looked directly at her. Because careless words can cost people. A muscle moved in Sterling's jaw. No one spoke. Then she smiled, but there was no humor in it. Fine. Master Sergeant Brooks can decide whether your observation is worth his time. She turned away. After 2 steps, she stopped. Oh, and read, ma'am. If this becomes another excuse for you to claim you were denied opportunities you hadn't earned, understand something now. She looked back over her shoulder. This command rewards readiness, not resentment. The words were quiet. That made them worse. Sterling walked away. Marcus stared at the floor for 1 second. Then another. Brooks looked sick. Laura looked furious. Neither emotion changed what had just happened. Marcus reached for his tool roll. "Sergeant, where do you want me?" Brooks didn't answer. Marcus looked up. Brooks's eyes were fixed on him. "You know I saw the scores." Marcus said nothing. "I saw every one of them." Still nothing. Brooks rubbed a hand across his mouth. "I told myself the general had reasons." Marcus quietly fastened one buckle on the canvas roll. Brooks continued. "I told myself you'd get your turn." Marcus finally spoke. Did you believe that?" Brooks looked away. That was answer enough. Laura put her glasses back on. "There's a difference between not causing the injustice and doing nothing while it happens." Brooks flinched. Marcus did, because the sentence reached farther than one master sergeant. It reached 40 people in Hangar 4. It reached every lowered face, every nervous laugh, every person who had known Sterling was wrong but decided survival required silence. Brooks stared at the dead aircraft, then at Marcus. "Get the shutdown recordings." Marcus paused. Brooks nodded toward the diagnostic station. "All of them, last 30 days. Marcus moved immediately. As he passed Laura, she spoke quietly enough that only he heard. "Read." He stopped. Her eyes moved once toward the canvas roll. "That old wrench." Marcus glanced down. "What about it, ma'am?" For the first time since he'd met her, Laura Bennett seemed uncertain. "Nothing yet." Marcus waited. She looked toward Sterling across the hangar, then back at him. "Go pull the recordings." Marcus did. Behind him, Brooks stood very still. For months, he had told himself that silence was neutrality. Tonight, for the first time, he seemed to understand that Marcus had never experienced it that way. And before dawn, Daniel Brooks would have to decide whether protecting his career mattered more than finally saying aloud what he already knew. Marcus carried the shutdown recordings to the diagnostic station while rain whispered against the hangar roof. The clock above the tool cage read 10:18 p.m. Less than 8 hours remained before sunrise. Master Sergeant Brooks plugged the archived files into the main terminal. One by one, engine run traces appeared across the screen. Temperature curves, pressure values, vibration readings, throttle positions, maintenance notes, numbers everywhere. Marcus stared at them. Then he looked toward the aircraft. "Can we pull Captain Carter's flight data too?" Brooks nodded. "Already archived." Captain Emily Carter had returned to Redstone 6 hours earlier with an aircraft that should not have made everyone this nervous. At 37, Emily had flown enough difficult sorties to know the difference between a rough engine and a dangerous one. Earlier that afternoon, she had been climbing through 15,000 feet when the first warning appeared. Not dramatic. Not yet. A faint vibration through the pedals, then a slight hesitation in thrust. She had checked the gauges. Nothing alarming. The aircraft systems told her the engine was operating inside acceptable limits. But Emily had felt something through the airframe that the screens did not seem to understand. A few minutes later, the vibration returned. Stronger. Then the thrust fluctuated sharply. By the time the warning systems caught up, Emily was already turning home. She landed safely. Barely. Now the aircraft sat under Hangar 4's lights while a team of experienced technicians tried to explain why its recorded data appeared cleaner than the flight had felt. Brooks pulled up Emily's debrief. "Listen to this." Her recorded voice filled the station speakers. "Initial vibration began during climb. Short duration. Felt through the pedals before any warning indication. Second event was stronger. Throttle response became uneven. Engine instruments remained mostly normal until the final power fluctuation. Marcus leaned closer. Play the part about the vibration again. Brooks did. Marcus closed his eyes. Laura Bennett stood several feet behind them, arms folded. Sterling had moved into the glass-walled office overlooking the hangar, but everyone could feel her attention even from there. Marcus opened his eyes. The system reacted after she felt it. Brooks looked at him. Meaning? Whatever started this may not be something the normal sensors were designed to catch early. Laura stepped closer. That's a broad statement. Yes, ma'am. So narrow it. Marcus looked back at the traces. I need to hear the shutdown recordings. Brooks opened the first file. A turbine wound down through the speakers. Smooth, clean. Marcus listened. Next one. Another shutdown, again clean. Next. The third sounded different. Marcus raised one finger. Stop. Brooks paused the recording. What? Back up 3 seconds. Brooks did. The sound came again, a deep turbine whine dropping in pitch. Then beneath it, tick, tick, 2 faint metallic notes. Marcus felt the hair rise along his forearms. That's it. Brooks frowned. I barely heard anything. Laura leaned toward the speaker. Again. The recording played. This time everyone listened for it. Tick, tick. Laura's eyes narrowed. Brooks looked at Marcus. When was this recorded? He checked the timestamp. 3 weeks ago. Marcus's expression changed. Any fault logged? Brooks scanned the file. No. Laura asked. Maintenance action? Routine inspection only. Marcus pointed at the waveform. Play the next shutdown after that. Brooks opened another file. No double note. Next. Nothing. Then another. Tick, tick. Brooks sat straighter. That one's 9 days later. Marcus nodded. So it isn't constant. Sterling's voice came from behind them. Congratulations. They turned. She had left the office without anyone noticing. You've discovered that machinery makes noise. Marcus kept his voice calm. Yes, ma'am. Sterling stepped toward the terminal. And somehow this explains why tomorrow's demonstration aircraft is grounded. Not yet, Sterling smiled. At least you're learning. Laura spoke before Marcus could answer. He found the same anomaly in recordings, separated by more than a week. Sterling looked at her. And it deserves correlation. With what? Marcus answered. Operating conditions. Sterling turned back to him. More listening? Yes, ma'am. She exhaled through her nose. Fine. Entertain me. Marcus pulled Captain Carter's flight data beside the shutdown recordings. He began comparing timestamps. Brooks watched him work. What are you looking for? A condition that appears before the sound. Temperature? Maybe. Pressure? Maybe. Sterling crossed her arms. Very scientific. Marcus ignored the remark. He moved through the files slowly, then stopped. Here. Brooks leaned in. What? Marcus highlighted one operating range. Every recording with the double note follows a run where the engine spent time in this band. Laura studied the display. That's narrow. Yes. Brooks checked another file. No sound here. Marcus pointed. That engine run never entered the same range. Brooks opened another. It matched. Another. Matched again. The room grew quieter. Sterling stepped closer. How many? Brooks counted. 7 recordings with the metallic note. And all 7 follow operation in the same range. Sterling said nothing. Marcus continued. Now compare Captain Carter's flight. Brooks brought up Emily's data. The aircraft had passed directly through the same operating band minutes before she reported the first vibration. Laura's expression hardened. There it is. Brooks looked at Marcus. You predicted that before we checked. Marcus nodded. I heard the same relationship in the shutdown. Sterling's face remained unreadable. For the first time, though, she did not laugh. Marcus could see the change. Small, but real. He had moved the problem. Until now, the aircraft had been a mystery with scattered symptoms. Now there was a pattern. That made Marcus more dangerous to Sterling than any argument could have. Because arguments could be dismissed. Patterns could be tested. Brooks stood. We need to inspect the maintenance events tied to this operating condition. Marcus nodded. And anything changed during the weeks before the first double note appeared. Laura added, filter by vibration, airflow, compressor, and accessory work. Brooks started pulling records. Sterling watched them. Then she said, stop. No one moved. Sterling looked directly at Marcus. Before everyone turns this into some miracle, let's be clear. You found a correlation. Yes, ma'am. Not a cause. No, ma'am. You haven't fixed anything. No, ma'am. You haven't even proven the sound matters. Marcus held her gaze. No, ma'am. Sterling seemed almost disappointed that he would not fight her. She stepped closer. Then why do you look so confident? Marcus answered honestly. Because the engine wasn't lying. That stopped the room. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Marcus pointed toward the screen. The instruments were showing what they were designed to measure. Captain Carter felt something before those systems knew how to describe it. The sound appeared before the fault became obvious. He looked toward the aircraft. It was telling us the problem was there earlier than we thought. Brooks leaned back from the monitor. Laura's gaze shifted from Marcus to the wrench inside the partly opened tool roll. Sterling noticed neither. Instead, she looked around Hangar 4 and saw the same people who had laughed earlier now paying attention to Marcus. That was the moment her frustration turned into something colder. Control was shifting. Not because Marcus outranked her. Not because anyone had given him authority. Because he had found something. Sterling raised her voice just enough for the nearby technicians to hear. Let's not get carried away. Recruit Reed has identified an interesting noise. That is all. Nobody laughed. The silence this time belonged to her. Sterling felt it. Her face tightened. Then she looked at Marcus. You understand the stakes tomorrow? Yes, ma'am. Senior Allied officials arrive at 0700. This aircraft is part of the readiness demonstration. Marcus nodded. So if your theory sends this team down the wrong path tonight, you won't just waste time. You'll jeopardize an event people far above your pay grade have spent months preparing. Brooks looked up sharply. General, that's not, Sterling continued. And since you were so eager to accept my challenge, let's make sure you understand the rest of it. She stepped into the open floor where more personnel could hear. If this aircraft is not cleared before dawn because this team followed your theory, I will personally recommend your transfer out of the program. The words carried. Several heads turned. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This was no longer a joke. Sterling had just attached his future to a fault that had already defeated experienced technicians. Laura said, General, he's working under supervision. Sterling looked at her. And I'm holding him responsible for the confidence he displayed publicly. Brooks stood. He didn't ask for the public challenge. No, Sterling replied. He merely accepted it. Marcus could have argued. He could have reminded her that she had created the spectacle. He could have said what everyone already knew. Instead, he looked at the aircraft, at the silent engine, at the data glowing on the monitor, then back at Sterling. I understand, ma'am. Something flickered in Brooks's face. Sterling nodded. Good. She turned away. Marcus waited until she had crossed half the hangar before he released the breath he had been holding. Brooks lowered his voice. She had no business doing that. Marcus looked at him. You going to tell her? The question landed harder than accusation. Brooks said nothing, Laura did not rescue him. Marcus turned back to the terminal. Pull the maintenance history. Brooks hesitated, then sat down. The records began loading. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5. Hundreds of routine entries, inspections, component checks, minor adjustments. Nothing that immediately explained the sound. Then Marcus saw one line. He leaned closer. Wait. Brooks stopped scrolling. A maintenance event from several weeks earlier sat buried among ordinary paperwork. Nothing dramatic, no emergency, no major repair. Just a short note attached to a service action on a system previous technicians had considered unrelated to the engine anomaly. Marcus read it twice. Laura noticed his expression. What? Marcus pointed at the entry. This happened 2 days before the first double note. Brooks read the line. That system isn't part of the fault tree we've been using. I know. Sterling, watching from across Hangar 4, saw 3 people suddenly lean toward the same screen. Marcus looked at the aircraft. For the first time that night, the mystery did not feel random. It felt connected. And if he was right, the engine failure had not begun during Captain Carter's flight at all. It had begun weeks earlier, hidden inside a maintenance event everyone had already forgotten. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. The entry was ordinary enough to disappear inside hundreds of routine records. A scheduled service adjustment, a minor vibration notation, a component inspection signed off with no further action required. Nothing about it looked urgent. That was exactly why it bothered him. Open the full report, Marcus said. Brooks clicked. A longer maintenance form appeared. Laura Bennett moved beside them. Marcus read silently. The earlier technicians had noted a brief vibration after servicing an auxiliary system. The engine had passed every standard check afterward. No warning codes, no abnormal temperatures, no visible damage. The aircraft had gone back into service. 2 days later, the first metallic double note appeared in a shutdown recording. Marcus pointed at the dates. There. Brooks frowned. That still doesn't prove they're connected. No, Sergeant. Sterling's voice came from behind them. Finally, something sensible. Marcus turned. Rebecca Sterling stood only a few feet away now. She had been watching long enough to understand the direction of the conversation. Her eyes dropped to the open maintenance record. An unrelated service entry from weeks ago, she said. That's your breakthrough? Marcus kept his tone even. It may be part of the chain, ma'am. Maybe. Yes, ma'am. Sterling glanced around. More people had returned to Hangar 4. Word had spread again. The disabled aircraft, the recruit, the challenge, the deadline. Personnel who had no reason to be there had found reasons. A contractor carrying a clipboard. 2 off-shift technicians standing near the hangar doors. An officer lingering beside a tool cabinet. 40 people might not have been present yet, but enough had gathered to make the room feel like a stage again. Sterling noticed too. Marcus saw it in the way her shoulders straightened. She moved into the open floor. Recruit Reed. Yes, ma'am. You live in Eastwood, correct? The question caught him off guard. Yes, ma'am. Above a grocery store? Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Yes, ma'am. A few people looked at one another. Sterling gave a small nod, as if confirming a technical fact. And your civilian background before enlistment involved local maintenance work? Yes. Industrial repair? Yes, ma'am. Not advanced military propulsion? No, ma'am. Her voice sharpened. So let's be clear about what is happening here. A recruit from Eastwood, with no advanced propulsion certification, is asking this command to redirect an already critical maintenance effort because he heard a noise. The room went still. Marcus knew exactly what she was doing. His address had nothing to do with the aircraft. His boots had nothing to do with the data. But Sterling was building a picture. One detail at a time. Not of his reasoning, of his place. Marcus looked toward Brooks. The master sergeant's face tightened. Still, he said nothing. Sterling continued. How many advanced diagnostic courses have you completed? None, ma'am. And whose decision was that? Marcus hesitated. The silence stretched. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Answer. I wasn't selected. A few heads lifted. Sterling smiled faintly. Exactly. Laura stepped forward. General, that is not the same thing as being unqualified. Sterling turned toward her. I didn't ask for commentary. Laura held her ground. No, ma'am. The tension snapped through the room. Marcus wanted to disappear from the center of it. Not because he was ashamed, because he understood what happened when powerful people felt challenged in public. They stopped defending facts. They started defending themselves. Sterling looked back at Marcus. Your boots. Marcus blinked. Ma'am? She glanced down. They look like they've seen better days. Marcus said nothing. Your apartment is over a neighborhood market. Your prior job was civilian industrial maintenance. You have no advanced certification here. Yet somehow you think 40 experienced professionals should stop what they're doing because you have a feeling. Marcus felt heat rise behind his face. He looked at the people around him. Some looked angry now, some uncomfortable. Most did what people often did when authority became cruel. They studied the floor. No one laughed this time. That somehow hurt more. Marcus spoke quietly. It isn't a feeling, ma'am. Sterling's eyes fixed on him. No? No, it's a pattern. He pointed toward the records. The sound begins after that service event. It appears only after a specific operating range. Captain Carter felt vibration before the systems showed a major fault. Those things may still turn out to be unrelated, but they're measurable. Sterling stepped closer. And if you're wrong, Marcus answered immediately, then we stop. And if you waste the rest of the night, then that's on me. Brooks finally spoke. No. Everyone turned. His voice was low but firm. It's on me. Sterling stared at him. Brooks swallowed. I'm the maintenance supervisor on this shift. Reed doesn't touch that aircraft without my authorization. If I authorize an inspection, responsibility is mine. Marcus looked at him. For the first time that night, Brooks had placed himself between Marcus and the consequences instead of behind procedure. Sterling's expression hardened. Be careful, Master Sergeant. Yes, ma'am. I would hate for misplaced sympathy to compromise your judgment. Brooks's jaw tightened. It isn't sympathy. Sterling looked at Marcus again. Then what is it? Brooks paused. Too long. Marcus knew what he wanted to say. The scores, the blocked training, the months of wasted ability. But Brooks wasn't ready, not yet. He looked toward the aircraft. His correlation is worth checking. Sterling gave a quiet laugh. There it is. She looked around the hangar. The entire maintenance operation is now bending around one recruit's intuition. Marcus took a breath. Ma'am, my concern is Captain Carter. That changed the air. Sterling stopped. Marcus continued. She brought the aircraft back once. His voice remained calm. If we clear the fault without understanding what caused it, somebody has to fly it again. No one moved. Marcus looked towards the aircraft, then back at Sterling. I don't care about winning a challenge. I care about knowing whether the next pilot is safe. The words carried farther than he intended. A few people who had been staring at the floor looked up. Brooks did. Laura did. Sterling's face did not soften. Instead, she seemed to resent the room for hearing Marcus clearly. You're very good at making yourself sound noble. Marcus felt the insult land. He let it. Then Sterling said, Fine. She turned toward Brooks. Authorize a limited inspection. Brooks nodded. Under supervision. Obviously. She looked back at Marcus. You have until dawn. Marcus said nothing. If this leads nowhere, I will recommend your immediate transfer out of this program. A murmur moved through the room. Sterling raised her voice. No advanced training, no diagnostic track, no second chance at Redstone. Brooks stepped forward. General, Sterling cut him off. He accepted the challenge. Marcus looked at her. No, ma'am. The room froze. Sterling's expression sharpened. What did you say? Marcus kept his hands at his sides. I accepted the chance to help fix the aircraft. A long silence. I did not accept a wager with flight safety. For the first time, someone near the back exhaled audibly. Sterling's face flushed. Marcus continued before fear could stop him. If Master Sergeant Brooks authorizes the inspection, I'll work under his supervision. If the data turns bad, we stop. If I'm wrong, I'll own that. He paused. But I won't treat Captain Carter's aircraft like a game. The silence that followed was enormous. 40 people, no laughter, no whispers, no one moving. Marcus could hear the rain on the roof and the faint electrical hum from the maintenance carts. Sterling stared at him. He knew what she saw. Not defiance. That would have been easier for her. She saw restraint, a recruit she had tried repeatedly to make small, refusing both humiliation and revenge. Finally, Sterling turned to Brooks. Proceed. Then she walked away. Only after she reached the glass office did the room seem to breathe again. Brooks looked at Marcus. You sure about this? No. Brooks raised an eyebrow. Marcus glanced toward the records. I'm sure enough to inspect it. Laura nodded once. That's the right answer. Brooks began assigning positions. Technicians moved toward the aircraft. The spectacle finally became work. Marcus carried his canvas tool roll to the inspection station and opened it beneath the white lights. Modern sockets, flashlight, gauge, the old wrench. Laura Bennett stopped behind him, her eyes fixed on the scarred metal. Not the size, not the worn finish. The letters, ER. Then her gaze shifted to the thinner jaw. Her face changed. Marcus noticed this time. Chief? Laura didn't answer immediately. She reached toward the wrench, then stopped before touching it. Where did you get that? Marcus looked down. It belonged to my grandfather. Laura's eyes stayed on the stamped initials. What was his name? Marcus hesitated. Across the hangar, Brooks called for him. Reed, I need you over here. Marcus picked up his flashlight. Elias. Laura went completely still. Marcus did not notice. He was already moving toward the aircraft. But behind him, Chief Warrant Officer Laura Bennett stared at the old 7/16-inch wrench as if a door from another lifetime had just opened in the middle of Hangar 4. And whatever she remembered, it was enough to drain the color from her face. Marcus had already reached the aircraft. Brooks stood beside the open maintenance station with 2 technicians waiting for instructions. Show me what you heard, Brooks said. Marcus looked around the hangar. Ventilation fans hummed overhead. A rolling cart rattled somewhere near the tool cage. Rain still ticked against the roof. 2 contractors were speaking quietly by the far wall. I need it quieter. One technician frowned. Brooks asked, How quiet? As quiet as we can get it without shutting down anything we need. Sterling, watching from the glass office, stepped out almost immediately. Here we go again. Marcus ignored her. Brooks did not. He raised his voice. Kill the unnecessary fans in this section. Stop moving equipment. Phones away unless you're recording test data. The hangar began to settle. One sound at a time disappeared. The rolling cart stopped. A radio went silent. The side ventilation unit wound down. Even the rain seemed farther away. Marcus stood beside the fighter aircraft with his eyes closed. He did not reach for a wrench. He did not touch a panel. He simply listened to an archived shutdown recording through a pair of maintenance speakers Brooks had positioned nearby. The turbine whine descended. Smooth, steady. Then, tick, tick. Marcus opened his eyes. Again. Brooks replayed it. Tick, tick. Sterling folded her arms. We've all heard it now. Marcus looked at her. I need to hear what comes before it. Sterling gave a humorless smile. Machines do not tell stories, Recruit Reed. Marcus turned back toward the speaker. No, ma'am. Patterns do. Laura Bennett watched him closely. Marcus asked Brooks to load a clean shutdown from before the first anomaly. The recording played. No metallic pulse. Again. Still clean. Then another from after the service event they had found. Tick, tick. Marcus stepped toward the monitor. Put the waveforms side by side. Brooks did. The screens filled with two nearly identical traces. Nearly. Marcus pointed to a small ripple buried near the lower end of the frequency curve. There. One technician leaned closer. I don't see anything. You won't if you're looking at amplitude alone. Marcus asked for the spectral view. Brooks changed the display. A thin peak appeared. Narrow, easy to miss. Marcus pointed. That spike. Brooks read the frequency. It's small. Yes. Could be noise. Could be. Sterling interrupted. So your breakthrough might be background interference. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. Her expression shifted, surprised by the answer. Marcus continued. That's why we compare it. He asked Brooks to overlay the 7 recordings carrying the metallic double note. One by one, the same narrow peak appeared, always in nearly the same place. Laura stepped closer. That's not random. Brooks shook his head slowly. No. Marcus asked for the operating histories tied to each recording. The same narrow engine range appeared again. Sterling's face tightened. Marcus did not look at her. He was too focused now. The work was beginning to pull him somewhere familiar. Back to long nights over damaged equipment. Back to the old Alabama garage where Elias had taught him to separate sound from noise. Back to the instinct that had helped him survive being overlooked for years. When people stopped listening to you, learn to listen harder to everything else. Brooks asked, What do you think we're seeing? Marcus took a breath. Something changes when the engine passes through that operating range. Not enough to trigger the main fault logic, but enough to alter the acoustic behavior. Mechanical contact? Maybe. Airflow? Maybe. Sterling laughed softly. That's a lot of maybes. Marcus looked at her. Because I'm not going to pretend certainty I don't have. The room went still. Sterling's eyes sharpened. Marcus turned back to Brooks. Can we correlate the peak against Captain Carter's flight? Brooks loaded the data. Emily Carter's sortie trace appeared. Marcus followed the timeline with one finger. There. The aircraft entered the same operating band. Minutes later, Emily reported the first vibration. Laura spoke quietly. Again. Brooks checked. The relationship held. Marcus's pulse quickened. This was no longer just sound. It was sequence. He asked for the maintenance event again. Brooks opened it. The service action occurred 2 days before the first recorded metallic pulse. Marcus stood very still. Sterling stepped closer. What exactly are you saying? Marcus answered carefully. I'm saying the engine changed after that maintenance event. That's speculation. Yes, ma'am. Sterling's voice rose. Then why are we wasting time? Marcus finally turned fully toward her. Because speculation becomes useful when it predicts something. He pointed to the records. The sound predicts the operating condition. The operating condition predicts the vibration. Captain Carter felt the vibration before the main warning logic reacted. Brooks looked from the data to Marcus. So? So the system isn't lying. Marcus glanced at the aircraft. It's answering a different question. Laura's eyes narrowed with interest. Sterling said nothing. Marcus continued. The sensors are telling us whether their assigned limits were exceeded. I'm asking what changed before those limits were crossed. Brooks leaned against the station. That narrows the inspection. Yes. To what? Marcus hesitated, then looked toward the maintenance entry. That service action touched a system connected indirectly to engine loading. One of the technicians nodded slowly. Not enough to show up in a standard fault tree. Exactly, Sterling cut in. Then you want us to tear apart an unrelated system based on a sound? No, ma'am. Marcus shook his head. I want a controlled inspection first. Brooks asked, what are you looking for? Anything that could change alignment, airflow, vibration transfer, or load path after that service action. Laura spoke, without removing major components. Yes, ma'am. Brooks nodded. That's reasonable. Sterling's eyes moved between them. The mood in the room had shifted again. Earlier, people had gathered to watch Marcus fail. Now they were listening because they wanted to know what he would say next. Sterling recognized it. Marcus could tell. She stepped forward. Finding a sound isn't fixing an engine. Her voice carried across Hangar 4. No one answered. The same sentence might have drawn laughter an hour earlier. Now it sounded defensive. Marcus did not challenge her. He simply said, no, ma'am. That calm response seemed to make the silence heavier. Brooks began assigning the limited inspection. Carter, grab the scope. Jennings, pull the service schematics. Reed, you stay with me. Marcus nodded. Technicians moved. The work accelerated. Metal drawers opened. Toolboxes rolled into position. Lights were repositioned. For the first time that night, Marcus was not standing at the edge of the work. He was inside it. Not in command, not pretending to be, but contributing. Laura remained near the bench. Her gaze drifted again toward Marcus's tool roll. The wrench was still partly visible, one jaw thinner. She reached toward it, then stopped. Her hand trembled once. Barely. Brooks noticed. You all right, Chief? Laura pulled her hand back. Fine. You don't look fine. Her eyes remained on the wrench. I said I'm fine. Brooks looked at her, then at Marcus across the hangar. Something passed through his expression. He knew she was hiding something. Across the floor, Marcus knelt beside the inspection area under Brooks's supervision. A technician fed a scope into a narrow access point while Marcus studied the schematic. There, Marcus said. The technician adjusted. A shadow moved across the monitor. Then something appeared. A faint mark. Not a break. Not obvious damage. Just a trace where there should have been none. Brooks leaned closer. What is that? Marcus stared at it. His hope rose too quickly. He tried to suppress it. It may be contact evidence. Sterling approached. Maybe? Marcus looked up. Yes, ma'am. She stared at the monitor. The room waited. Marcus could feel the story trying to become simple. He had found the sound. He had found the maintenance link. Now, perhaps, he had found the damage. But Elias's voice lived deep in his memory. Never fall in love with the first answer. Marcus forced himself to look again. Longer, closer. Something about the mark bothered him. Brooks asked, You think this is it? Marcus did not answer right away. Sterling's mouth curved faintly. What happened to all that confidence? Marcus kept staring at the image. Then he said, I think we found something. Brooks nodded. But? Marcus looked at the clock, then back at the monitor. But I don't know yet if it's the cause. Outside, the rain began to ease. Inside Hangar 4, hope had finally entered the room. And that made what came next even more dangerous. Because Marcus was about to learn that finding part of the truth could be worse than finding nothing at all. The mark on the inspection screen looked persuasive. Too persuasive. A faint crescent of wear ran along the edge of a component near the area affected by the earlier service event. Under the bright scope light, it appeared almost silver against the darker metal. Brooks stared at it. That could explain the vibration. Marcus did not answer. Technical Sergeant Carter leaned closer to the monitor. If that surface is making intermittent contact under load, it could create exactly the kind of noise we heard. Laura Bennett stood behind them with her arms folded. Could. Carter glanced at her. Yes, ma'am. Could. Marcus appreciated the word. It left room for doubt. Sterling did not. She stepped toward the screen. So after all this listening, we've found a physical defect. Marcus finally spoke. We've found evidence of contact. Sterling looked at him. That sounds like a defect. Not necessarily the root cause. Her mouth tightened. Recruit Reed, at some point you have to decide whether you actually believe your own theory. Marcus looked back at the image. He did believe part of it. That was the problem. Everything lined up just well enough to tempt him into certainty. The service event. The first metallic double note 2 days later. The narrow operating band. Captain Carter's vibration. The visible contact mark. The story was beginning to close around a single explanation. Marcus had seen that happen before. A mechanic found one bad part and stopped asking why it went bad. A technician found one loose fitting and ignored what loosened it. Elias used to call it falling in love with the first answer. Marcus pushed the memory away. Brooks asked, "What do you want to do?" Marcus pointed toward the service schematic. Inspect the mounting points around it. Verify clearances. Then run a controlled test. Sterling looked at the clock. You've already spent hours proving something is wrong with an aircraft we know is broken. Brooks turned. General, we're narrowing the fault. Are you? Her voice remained calm. That aircraft is either ready by morning or it isn't. Marcus looked toward the disabled fighter. Then we shouldn't rush the part that decides whether it's safe. Sterling's eyes snapped toward him. No one spoke. Marcus added, "Ma'am." Laura hid the beginning of a smile by looking down at her notes. Sterling did not. Proceed. The inspection took nearly 40 minutes. Every clearance remained within published limits. Every fastener checked. No crack, no obvious misalignment. The contact mark was real, but small. Brooks stood beside Marcus as the last measurement appeared. Still think it matters? Yes. As the cause? Marcus hesitated. I think it's connected. That's not what I asked. Marcus looked at him. No, I'm not sure it's the cause. Brooks nodded. Good. Marcus frowned. Good? You're still thinking. The remark landed differently, coming from Brooks. Hours earlier, Brooks had been one more person protecting himself with silence. Now he was standing beside Marcus inside the uncertainty. That mattered. The team prepared for a controlled engine cycle under the maintenance procedures Brooks authorized. Nobody treated it casually. Personnel moved to designated positions. Instrumentation was checked twice. The aircraft sat beneath the white lights with cables running from its maintenance ports toward diagnostic carts. Marcus remained beside Brooks. His place was clear. Observe, correlate, speak if he saw something. Do not pretend he had authority he did not possess. Sterling watched from behind the safety line. Laura stood near the monitoring station. Ready? Brooks called. Technicians answered one by one. Marcus looked at the clock. 1:43 a.m. Dawn no longer felt distant. Brooks initiated the test sequence. The engine began to turn. A low mechanical murmur grew into a deeper, steadier sound that filled the hangar. The polished floor seemed to tremble beneath Marcus's boots. His eyes moved between the data and the aircraft. Temperature normal, pressure normal, vibration within limits. The engine passed through the operating range Marcus had identified. Marcus leaned forward. Nothing, no double note. Carter looked over. Clean. Brooks kept watching. Hold. Seconds passed. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Maybe they had found it. Maybe the inspection and minor adjustment around the contact area had corrected enough of the condition. Maybe. A warning flashed amber. Marcus's stomach dropped. Sergeant! I see it. A vibration trace jumped, then jumped again. The metallic double note struck through the sound. Tick, tick, louder than before. The next warning appeared immediately. Brooks's voice hardened. Terminate! The engine wound down. Another vibration spike crossed the screen. Terminate now! The shutdown sequence completed. Silence crashed into Hangar 4. No one moved. Marcus stared at the monitor. The fault had returned. Stronger. Carter pulled off his headset. Vibration amplitude was almost twice the previous recorded event. Brooks checked the readings again. Temperatures stayed inside limits, Laura asked. Any secondary warning? Brief, cleared during shutdown. Marcus heard their voices as though from the far end of a tunnel. He had been wrong. Not completely, but enough. The mark had not been the answer, and now the anomaly looked worse. Sterling walked toward him. She did not smile. That would have been easier. She looked up at the large clock above the tool cage. Then she looked at Marcus. Sunrise is getting closer, Reed. Her voice was almost gentle. The words cut deeper because of it. Marcus said nothing. Sterling continued. You asked this team to follow your pattern. Brooks stepped in. I authorized the test. Sterling did not look at him, and the fault intensified. Marcus forced himself to speak. Yes, ma'am. Any explanation? Not yet. Then perhaps we've reached the point where humility becomes useful. Marcus looked at the dead aircraft. The same aircraft that, an hour ago, had seemed ready to reveal its secret. Now it felt farther away than ever. Around the hangar, the mood shifted. People who had pressed closer during Marcus's breakthrough began finding reasons to leave. A contractor checked his phone and walked toward the side door. 2 technicians returned to another workstation. Someone quietly rolled a cart away. Nobody mocked Marcus. That almost made it worse. Hope had made them curious. Failure made them cautious. Within minutes, the crowd thinned. Marcus remained where he was. Sterling watched them go. You see, Reed? He looked at her. This is the difference between theory and responsibility. Marcus felt the urge to answer, to remind her that the contact evidence was real, that the operating correlation was real, that Captain Carter's report still supported the pattern. But none of those truths changed the warning that had just flashed on the screen. So he said only, yes, ma'am. Sterling seemed dissatisfied. She wanted resistance, something she could defeat. Marcus would not give it to her. She turned to Brooks. Return the team to standard diagnostic protocol. Brooks looked at Marcus, then at Sterling. We haven't disproved the correlation. We've proven it didn't fix the aircraft. That's different. Sterling's gaze hardened. You are dangerously close to letting guilt interfere with judgment, Master Sergeant. Brooks went still. Marcus heard it. So did Laura. Sterling had said too much. Brooks's voice lowered. What guilt would that be, General? Sterling looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned away. Standard protocol. She walked toward the office. Brooks watched her go. Marcus quietly gathered his flashlight and notes. Laura approached. You're stopping? Marcus shook his head. I'm getting out of their way. Same thing? No, ma'am. He looked toward the monitoring screen. I need to think. Brooks came closer. You were right about the sound. Marcus gave a tired laugh with no humor in it. Being right about one thing doesn't make the plane fly. No. Brooks paused. But being wrong about one answer doesn't erase what you already proved. Marcus looked at him. For a second, he wanted to believe that. Then he remembered the warning, the stronger vibration, the disappearing crowd. I sent them toward the wrong part. You sent us toward evidence, and we still don't know what it means. Brooks had no answer. Marcus carried his canvas tool roll toward an empty workbench at the edge of Hangar 4. The rain had stopped. Water still dripped from the roof gutters outside, each drop faintly audible through the open side vent. He sat down. For the first time all night, no one was asking him a question. No one was laughing either. The quiet felt enormous. Marcus opened the tool roll. His fingers passed over the flashlight, the gauge, the sockets, then stopped on the old wrench. He lifted it. 7/16, scarred steel, one jaw ground thinner. He turned it slowly beneath the fluorescent light. Across the hangar, Laura Bennett saw what he was holding. She took one step toward him, then stopped. Marcus did not notice. He was somewhere else now, back in Alabama, back beside a workbench worn smooth by decades of hands. Back with Elias Reed, already an old man then, but still patient enough to let Marcus struggle with a problem before offering the answer. Marcus remembered a machine that had fooled him. He had replaced the part that showed the damage. The problem came back the next day. He had been angry, embarrassed, certain the machine had somehow betrayed him. Elias had handed him this very wrench. "Look again," he had said. Marcus had pointed at the broken piece. "I did. That's what failed." Elias shook his head. "No, son." He tapped the damaged part. "That's what got hurt." Marcus remembered the pause, then the lesson. Sometimes the damage you see is only the scar left by the real problem. Marcus stared at the thin jaw of the wrench. Elias had ground it down years earlier because the ordinary tool would not reach where he needed to work. He had changed the tool instead of forcing the machine to fit his expectations. Marcus's breathing slowed. The contact mark. They had treated it as a cause. What if it was only a scar? He sat forward. The team had been asking which component was failing. Maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe something earlier had forced a healthy component into the wrong condition. Marcus looked across the hangar toward the maintenance record station. Weeks earlier, the service event, the first double note, the vibration, the mark, a chain, not a single broken link. His pulse began to quicken. Laura finally approached. "Marcus." It was the first time she had called him by his first name. He looked up. Her eyes moved to the wrench. "What did Elias teach you about that tool?" Marcus stared at her. "How do you know his name?" Laura's face changed. For a moment, the rank disappeared. The hangar disappeared. Something older stood behind her eyes. "I think," she said quietly, "the better question is why I recognize that wrench." Marcus looked down at the stamped letters, then back at Laura. Across Hangar 4, the maintenance team had returned to the same standard fault trees that had failed them all evening. Marcus suddenly knew he could not, because the first answer had been wrong. And somewhere inside that failure was the clue Elias Reed had spent a lifetime teaching him how to find. Marcus turned the old wrench in his hand. Under the fluorescent lights, the steel looked almost black in places from age and oil. One jaw was normal. The other had been ground thinner by hand, not neatly, but carefully enough to show intention. Laura Bennett stood across from him. "How do you know this wrench?" Marcus asked. Laura glanced toward the maintenance floor. Brooks and the others had returned to the standard diagnostic process, rechecking systems they had already checked once. Sterling remained near the glass office, speaking with two officers in low tones. Laura looked back at Marcus. "Not yet." His expression tightened. "You just said you recognize it." "I do." "Then tell me." Laura shook her head. "Not until I'm sure." Marcus stared at her. For a second, frustration threatened to break through. He had spent the night being doubted by people who seemed to know less than they claimed. Now the first person who appeared to know something real was asking him to wait. Laura saw it. "I'm not trying to keep something from you. Feels that way." "I know." Her voice softened. "But if I say what I think before I verify it, I'm doing the same thing everyone else has done tonight. falling in love with the first answer. That stopped him. Marcus looked down at the wrench again. The irony was enough to cool his anger. Laura nodded toward it. What did Elias tell you? Marcus leaned back against the workbench. The rain had stopped completely now. The hangar roof ticked softly as water ran down gutters outside. He said damage isn't always the cause. Laura waited. Marcus rubbed one thumb along the thinner jaw. He used to say if something looked obviously broken, that was when you had to slow down. A memory opened. Not suddenly. More like a door Marcus had kept closed because opening it always brought too much with it. Alabama, years earlier. Marcus had already been an adult by then, old enough to think he understood machines better than he really did. Elias Reed was slowing down. His hair had gone white. His shoulders had rounded. The old garage behind his house smelled the way it always had. Motor oil, coffee, hot metal, and sawdust from the shelves Elias had built himself. Marcus had been working on an industrial pump that kept throwing the same bearing. He replaced the damaged bearing. The pump failed again. He replaced it a second time. It failed again. Marcus remembered slamming a rag onto the workbench. That bearing is junk. Elias looked up from a stool. No. Marcus had stared at him. Granddad, I replaced it twice. I know. Then what do you mean, no? Elias had picked up the scarred wrench. He pointed at the damaged bearing. That part failed. Marcus crossed his arms. Exactly. Elias shook his head. That doesn't mean it started the trouble. He moved slowly to the pump. Even then, arthritis had stiffened his fingers. He ran one hand along the housing. Then he handed Marcus the wrench. Try that bolt. Marcus looked at the narrow space. The wrench won't fit. Look at it. That was when Marcus noticed one jaw had been ground thinner. You did this? Long time ago. Why? Because the machine didn't care what size my tool was supposed to be. Marcus remembered smiling despite himself. Elias did not. He pointed toward the hidden fastener. Get in there. Marcus did. The bolt turned too easily. Loose. Not enough to fall out. Enough to let the pump housing shift under load. That slight movement pushed the shaft out of alignment. The shaft damaged the bearing. Marcus stared at it. Elias nodded toward the failed part. That bearing is the scar. He tapped the loose mounting point. This is the wound. The memory faded. Marcus stood again in Hangar 4. His fingers tightened around the wrench. Laura watched his face. What? Marcus looked toward the aircraft. We did the same thing. Laura followed his gaze. The contact mark? We found damage and assumed it was the problem. He stood. But what if it was only the result of something else moving where it shouldn't? Laura's expression sharpened. Go on. Marcus walked toward the maintenance record station. Brooks looked up as he approached. Thought you were thinking. I was. Find anything? Maybe the question. Brooks gave him a tired look. At this point, I'll take a good question. Marcus pulled up the service record from several weeks earlier, the one they had tied to the first metallic double note. He opened every attached sub-entry. Not just the completed inspection, the preparation notes, component access, temporary removals, reinstallation, torque verification. Sterling saw them gathering and approached. What now? Marcus ignored the tone. Sergeant, during this service action, what had to be moved for access? Brooks scanned the record. Several support items. Anything tied to mounting or alignment? Brooks scrolled. Not directly. Indirectly? Laura moved beside him. Open the work package. Brooks did. More pages appeared. Marcus read fast, then stopped. There. A temporary support assembly had been loosened during access. Released. Reinstalled. Verified. Nothing unusual. Marcus tapped the entry. Who signed this? Brooks read the name. A contractor team. Sterling cut in. The work passed inspection. Marcus nodded. I'm not saying it didn't. Then what are you saying? Marcus looked at her. If something was reinstalled with intolerance but not seated exactly the way it had been before, the system could still pass inspection. Brooks leaned closer and shift later under a specific load. Marcus nodded, enough to transfer vibration somewhere else. Laura added, enough to make another component look guilty. Sterling's expression tightened. We are now blaming acceptable maintenance because a wrench reminded you of your grandfather. Marcus looked at her. No, ma'am. He pointed to the screen. I'm asking whether the system moved after the maintenance event. Sterling crossed her arms. And how do you plan to prove that? Marcus looked at Brooks. Comparison. With what? Pre-service dimensional records. If we have them. Brooks began searching. For several seconds, only keyboard taps broke the silence. Then he stopped. We do. Marcus stepped closer. Before the service event, the relevant measurement had been recorded during an earlier inspection. After the service event, another measurement existed. Both were within allowable limits. But they were not identical. Marcus stared at the difference. Small, almost laughably small. Laura saw it too. That's movement. Brooks shook his head, still inside tolerance. Yes, Marcus said, sitting still. He pulled up Captain Carter's operating conditions. Now put load on it. Brooks understood. The higher operating range. Thermal expansion, vibration. For the first time, the pieces began to fit without forcing them. The service event had not created an obvious defect. It had changed a relationship. Under ordinary conditions, the system remained acceptable. Under a specific combination of heat and load, the slight shift allowed contact. That contact created the metallic double note. Repeated stress increased the vibration. Eventually, Captain Carter experienced the larger failure. Marcus felt hope return, but this time it was different. Slower, more cautious. He had learned what happened when hope outran proof. Brooks looked at him. You think that's the chain? I think it's closer. Sterling laughed under her breath. Closer. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. She looked at the clock. 4 hours until dawn. I know. You don't sound concerned. Marcus looked at her. I am. Then perhaps show it. His voice stayed calm. Being scared doesn't make the data clearer. Sterling's face hardened. Laura looked down to hide her reaction. Brooks asked, What do you need? Marcus pointed towards the maintenance package. Older records. How old? As far back as we have for that assembly. Sterling stared at him. For what purpose? I want to know whether this kind of shift has ever happened before. She shook her head. We don't have time for history lessons. Marcus looked down at the wrench, then back at her. Sometimes history is where the warning got buried. Laura went still. The words seemed to strike her harder than anyone else. She glanced again at ER. Marcus noticed. You know something. Laura exhaled. I might. About Elias? She did not answer directly. Instead, she stepped closer and held out her hand. Let me see the wrench. Marcus hesitated, then placed it in her palm. Laura turned it beneath the light. The stamped letters were clear. ER. But she was looking beside them. At first, Marcus saw nothing. Laura rubbed her thumb across the metal. A layer of old grime came away. Beneath it was another mark, almost erased, a tiny secondary stamp. Marcus had seen the wrench thousands of times. He had never noticed it. Laura's breathing changed. Brooks leaned in. What is it? Laura did not answer. Her thumb trembled over the faded mark. Marcus looked at her. Chief? Laura lifted her eyes. Whatever uncertainty had been there was gone. Now there was recognition and sorrow. I know where this wrench has been. Marcus stared at her. How? Laura closed her fingers around the tool for 1 second, as though touching something that belonged to another time. Then she looked toward the old maintenance archive terminal. "Because a long time ago," she said, "someone in my family came home because a man named Elias Reed refused to accept the first answer." Marcus felt the entire hangar seem to narrow around those words. He looked at the wrench, then at Laura, and for the first time in his life, Marcus understood that the tool his grandfather had carried through an Alabama garage had a history Elias had never fully told him. Laura held the wrench beneath the white maintenance light. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Brooks had stopped scrolling through the records. 2 technicians standing nearby slowly turned toward them. Even Sterling, who had been pretending not to care about the conversation, looked over from across the hangar. Marcus stepped closer. "What happened?" Laura stared at the faded second mark beside ER. "I was 26 when my brother Thomas came home after an aircraft incident that nearly ended his flying career." Marcus said nothing. Laura continued. "Thomas Bennett was 36, experienced, careful, the kind of man who checked everything twice and trusted almost nobody with a machine after something went wrong." Her voice had changed. The technical hardness was gone. What remained was personal. His aircraft developed a vibration problem after maintenance. The first inspection blamed a damaged component. They replaced it. The problem came back. Marcus looked down at the wrench. Laura nodded. Then they replaced another part. Brooks' expression shifted. "And it came back again?" "Yes." Marcus felt a chill. Laura turned the wrench in her hand. "My brother said everyone was focused on what was breaking. One mechanic kept asking why those parts were being forced out of alignment in the first place." Marcus already knew the answer before she spoke the name. "Elias." Laura looked at him. "Elias Reed." The words seemed to hang in the air. Marcus swallowed. Laura continued. "He wasn't famous. He wasn't the senior officer. He wasn't the man giving the briefings. According to Thomas, half the room barely listened when Elias spoke." Marcus stared at her. It sounded too familiar. What did he find? A mounting relationship had shifted after maintenance. Everything measured inside limits while the aircraft was sitting still. Under heat and load, the alignment changed just enough to transfer stress into another component. Brooks looked toward the aircraft. Marcus did too. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Laura said quietly, "The damaged part was only the scar." Marcus felt the words strike deeper than any insult Sterling had thrown at him. That was Elias's phrase. Not similar, exact. He looked at Laura. "He said that?" "According to Thomas, yes." Laura's eyes glistened slightly, though her voice remained steady. "Thomas kept a photograph from that maintenance team for the rest of his life. Elias was standing near the back, almost outside the frame." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "Of course he was," Laura continued. "The official report praised the aircrew and the senior maintenance leadership. Elias's name appeared once in an attachment most people never read. Sterling had crossed half the hangar now. What exactly is the point of this story?" Laura turned toward her. "The point, General, is that Marcus did not invent this way of thinking tonight." Sterling's expression hardened. "No one said he did." "You've implied repeatedly that his method is amateur instinct." "It is unconventional." Laura held up the wrench. "So was Elias Reed." Sterling looked at Marcus. "This changes nothing about the current aircraft," Marcus answered before Laura could. "No, ma'am." Sterling seemed surprised. Marcus continued. "It doesn't prove my theory." Laura looked at him with approval. "No," Marcus said, "but it gives us something to check." Brooks asked, "The older records?" Marcus nodded. "If this type of alignment shift has happened before, I want to know what conditions produced it." Laura handed the wrench back. As Marcus took it, she pointed to the faint second mark. "That stamp wasn't decorative." What is it? A maintenance shop identifier. Marcus looked closer. The tiny symbol was almost gone. Laura said, Thomas showed me the photograph because that wrench was visible on Elias's bench. Same ground-down jaw, same mark. Marcus ran his thumb across the metal. For years, the wrench had meant only one thing. Granddad. Now it meant something larger. A life of work done quietly enough to disappear. A black mechanic whose skill had kept others safe while recognition went elsewhere. Marcus looked toward the aircraft. He suddenly felt the weight of repeating history. Laura saw it. Don't carry this like a burden. Marcus gave her a tired look. How else am I supposed to carry it? As evidence. He frowned. Laura gestured toward the wrench. Evidence that being overlooked is not the same thing as being unimportant. Marcus looked away. Across the hangar, Sterling watched him with an expression he could not read. Maybe annoyance, maybe fear, maybe both. Brooks cleared his throat. We still need the older records. Marcus nodded. The moment became work again. That helped. They returned to the archive terminal. Brooks searched by assembly number, service category, vibration notes, alignment corrections, and earlier maintenance discrepancies. Files appeared one after another. Most meant nothing. Marcus read each one anyway. 2:36 a.m., 2:51, 3:07. Dawn kept moving closer. Sterling checked the clock often enough that Marcus stopped looking at it. Then Brooks opened a record from almost 4 years earlier. Wait, Marcus leaned in. A similar vibration complaint. No major fault. An alignment correction had been performed after technicians found a support point seated within tolerance but offset from its previous position. Laura read over his shoulder. There. Marcus opened the before and after measurements. The difference was small, almost identical to the shift they had found tonight. Brooks exhaled. Same pattern. Marcus's pulse quickened. Sterling stepped closer. What pattern? Marcus showed her. This aircraft had a similar condition before. 4 years ago. Yes, ma'am. And it was corrected. Yes. So what? Marcus pointed toward the original service note. They didn't replace the damaged component first. Brooks understood. They restored the alignment. Marcus nodded, and the vibration disappeared. Laura looked at Sterling. This is no longer just family history. Sterling ignored her. She looked at Marcus. What exactly do you propose? Marcus opened the current maintenance measurements again. He compared them against the older corrective record. The numbers lined up, not perfectly, enough. I think the support assembly installed several weeks ago is seated inside static tolerance but shifts under thermal load. Brooks asked. That creates contact downstream? Yes. The mark we found? A symptom. Laura finished the thought. The scar. Marcus nodded. Sterling's jaw tightened. Then why did your first adjustment make the vibration worse? Marcus had been waiting for that question. Because we treated the contact point. He looked directly at her. We changed the symptom without correcting what was forcing it there. For the first time, Sterling did not have an immediate reply. Marcus pointed toward the maintenance package. If we restore the original alignment relationship and verify it under controlled load, the contact should disappear without chasing another component. Brooks studied the numbers. Procedure? Standard realignment under supervision. Nothing improvised. Laura nodded. That matters. Sterling looked at the clock. 3 hours until dawn. Her face remained hard. But Marcus saw something else now. The balance had changed. Hours earlier, Sterling had controlled the room because rank made every silence belong to her. Now the room had evidence, and evidence did not salute. Sterling asked, How long? Brooks answered, About 90 minutes if everything goes clean. Sterling laughed once. 90 minutes. Marcus said nothing. She stepped closer to him. If this fails again, there is no third attempt. Brooks looked at her. General, no. Her eyes stayed on Marcus. You wanted the chance to prove your method. You've had it. Marcus felt the pressure settle over him. This time there would be no room for partial truth, no second explanation, no comfort in being close. Laura glanced at Marcus. He looked at the old wrench in his hand. Elias had once stood in another maintenance bay while people doubted him. Decades later, Marcus was standing in almost the same place. Different aircraft, different uniforms, same silence. He put the wrench back into the canvas roll. Then he looked at Brooks. I want to verify one more thing before we touch anything. Sterling's patience snapped. What now? Marcus pulled up the service discrepancy from several weeks earlier. There's a sign-off here that doesn't match the sequence in the work package. Brooks leaned closer. What do you mean? This verification was entered before the final seating check. Laura's eyes narrowed. That shouldn't happen. Brooks stared at the timestamps. Marcus opened another page, then another. The room grew quieter with each one. Sterling stepped forward. Who signed it? Brooks did not answer immediately. When he finally looked up, his face had changed. The name on the authorization trail was not Marcus's. It belonged to someone much higher in the chain. And for the first time that night, the engine problem was about to become more than a maintenance failure. It was about to expose how the system around Marcus had been operating too. Brooks stared at the timestamps. The verification entry had been recorded before the final seating check was completed. It did not prove that anyone had knowingly approved bad work, but it proved something in the process had happened out of order. Marcus leaned closer. Who authorized the return to service package? Brooks scrolled through the record. A contractor supervisor completed the work. Redstone accepted it afterward. Sterling stepped forward. Then correct the discrepancy and move on. Laura looked at her. We need to understand it first. We have less than 3 hours. That doesn't change the sequence. Sterling's voice sharpened. It changes everything. Marcus remained focused on the screen. The last thing he wanted was another confrontation. The aircraft mattered more than whatever politics were beginning to surface around it. Master Sergeant, can we verify the assembly position against the older baseline? Brooks nodded. Yes. And then inspect the seating points before realignment. Yes. Marcus looked at Sterling. That's what I recommend, ma'am. Sterling stared at him. You recommend? Yes, ma'am. The words were respectful. They still carried weight now. That was what had changed. Hours earlier, Sterling could turn Marcus into a joke merely by raising her voice. Now Brooks was waiting for his reasoning. Laura was testing it rather than dismissing it. Technicians who had once watched from a distance were standing around the diagnostic station, listening. Marcus had not gained rank. He had gained credibility. Sterling knew it. If I authorize this, she said, and you're wrong again, the demonstration is finished. Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. And your future here with it. Brooks looked at her. That's enough. The words came so unexpectedly that even Marcus turned. Sterling's face hardened. Excuse me? Brooks swallowed. Marcus could see fear in him, not panic, the deeper kind. The fear of a man who had spent 20 years building a career and knew one sentence could alter what remained of it. But Brooks did not retreat. I said that's enough, General. Nobody moved. Sterling stepped toward him. You should consider very carefully what you say next. I have. Brooks placed the tablet on the station. Showa. Reed did not create this maintenance discrepancy. He did not ground this aircraft. And he did not decide who received advanced training at Redstone. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Sterling's eyes narrowed. What does training have to do with this? Brooks looked at Marcus once, then back at Sterling. Everything. Laura said nothing. She did not need to. Brooks continued. Marcus Reed scored in the top 5% in diagnostic reasoning. Sterling's jaw tightened. His scores are irrelevant to highest fault isolation score in his intake group, Master Sergeant. And every time his name came forward for advanced training, it disappeared. The hangar became completely still. Marcus could hear a distant drip outside the side door. Sterling spoke quietly. "Are you accusing me of something?" Brooks looked pale, but his voice held. "I'm stating what happened." "Then state all of it." Brooks took a breath. "I submitted Reed for the propulsion orientation during his first month." Marcus looked at him. He had never known that. "You declined it," Brooks continued. "I submitted him for the diagnostic workshop 2 weeks later. Declined again." Sterling crossed her arms. "I make dozens of training decisions. You also removed him from the manufacturer systems course. He lacked experience. Because he wasn't being allowed to get any." That sentence landed like a dropped tool. Marcus looked down. For months, he had suspected the pattern. Hearing someone else finally say it aloud did not feel like victory. It felt like discovering that a wound he had tried to ignore was exactly as deep as he feared. Sterling looked around the hangar. She saw the faces, the same faces that had watched her mock Marcus. Only now nobody looked away. "This is insubordination," she said. Brooks shook his head. "No, ma'am." "What would you call it?" Brooks looked at Marcus. "Something I should have said months ago." Marcus's throat tightened. Brooks continued. "I saw the scores. I saw the assignments. I knew weaker candidates were getting opportunities he wasn't." His voice faltered for the first time. "And I told myself command had reasons because that was easier than asking whether those reasons were fair." Sterling stepped closer. "You are letting tonight distort your memory." "No, General," Laura finally spoke. "I saw it too." Sterling turned. Laura's expression was calm. Reed was repeatedly assigned inventory, cleanup, and basic inspections despite demonstrated technical aptitude. "I noticed the pattern. I asked about it tonight because it had become impossible to ignore." Sterling stared at her. "You're joining this?" "I'm telling you what I observed." Sterling's face flushed. Marcus felt the confrontation pulling attention away from the aircraft. "Ma'am." No one heard him. He raised his voice slightly. "General." Sterling turned sharply. Marcus pointed toward the fighter. "We still have a grounded aircraft." The simplicity of the statement broke the tension. Brooks looked toward the engine. Laura exhaled. Marcus continued. "Whatever happens with my assignments can happen later." Sterling stared at him. Marcus could have used the moment. He could have demanded answers. He could have listed every humiliation. Instead, he said, "Captain Carter needs us to know why that engine failed." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Brooks nodded. "Agreed." He pulled the realignment procedure onto the screen. Marcus stepped beside him. The older corrective record shows they restored the support relationship before replacing anything downstream. Brooks studied it. "We can reproduce that procedure." "Under controlled conditions." "Yes." Laura pointed at the current measurements. "We document everything before touching it." Marcus nodded. "And after?" Sterling stood apart from them. She was still the highest-ranking person in the hangar. But for the first, rank alone was not enough to control what happened next. If she refused the repair, the maintenance record would show that a technically supported procedure had been stopped after Brooks and Laura challenged her personnel decisions. If she approved it and Marcus succeeded, the recruit she had publicly humiliated would be vindicated in front of the same witnesses. Either choice carried consequences. The clock read 3:22 a.m. Sterling looked toward it, then toward the aircraft. Finally, toward Marcus. "Walk me through the procedure." Marcus did. No drama, no speeches. He explained the suspected load-induced shift, the static measurements, the older corrective record, the inspection sequence, the realignment, and the conditions that would require an immediate stop. Sterling interrupted twice with technical questions. Marcus answered both. When he did not know something, he said so. That seemed to affect her more than confidence would have. At last, Sterling looked at Brooks. "Do you support this?" "Yes, ma'am." "Chief Bennett?" "Yes." Sterling's gaze returned to Marcus. "You understand there are no shortcuts?" Marcus nodded. "No shortcuts. If the data turns bad, we stop. If any measurement moves outside procedure, we stop. If the aircraft gives us anything we cannot explain," Marcus looked toward the engine, "we stop." Sterling held his gaze. Then she said the word everyone had been waiting for. "Authorized." The hangar moved at once. Technicians rolled equipment into position. Inspection lamps swung over the open section. Brooks began reading the procedure aloud, while another technician documented every measurement. Marcus pulled on gloves. Laura came beside him. "You all right?" He looked toward Brooks. The master sergeant was assigning tasks with a steadiness that had not been there earlier. "He finally said it." Laura nodded. "Sometimes truth takes people longer than it should." Marcus glanced toward Sterling. "And sometimes too long still has consequences." "Yes." Marcus opened his tool roll. The old wrench lay inside. He touched it once but left it there. This repair would not be performed with family legend. It would be performed with approved tools, documented measurements, supervision, and evidence. Elias had taught him how to ask the question. Marcus still had to prove the answer. The team began. Fasteners were checked, reference points measured. The support assembly was carefully unloaded according to procedure. Then Carter, watching the gauge, frowned. "Hold." Everyone stopped. Brooks leaned in. "What?" Carter pointed. The reading shifted. Small, but unmistakable. Laura stepped closer. "Take it again." They did. Same result. Marcus felt his heartbeat in his throat. With the assembly unloaded, the measurement returned toward the older baseline. Brooks looked at Marcus. "You were right about the load." Marcus shook his head. "We're closer." Sterling heard him. This time she did not mock the caution. Brooks gave the order to continue. The assembly was reseated. Measurements were taken again, then again, each one documented. Marcus watched the numbers slowly align with the older corrective record. The contact point they had mistaken for the original defect now made sense. A scar, not the wound. By 4:31 a.m., the physical work was complete. Brooks removed his gloves. "Ready for controlled test." Marcus looked toward the hangar doors. The eastern sky beyond them was no longer black. A faint gray line had appeared above the runway. Dawn was coming. Sterling saw it too. So did everyone else. The marriage joke seemed very far away now. No one was laughing. Marcus walked toward the monitoring station. Behind him, Brooks called the team into test positions. Laura remained beside the aircraft. Sterling stood alone near the safety line. The repair had been authorized. The measurements were correct. The theory finally fit the evidence. But none of that mattered if the metallic double note came back. Marcus placed his headset on. Brooks looked at him through the glass partition. "Ready?" Marcus stared at the engine that had humiliated experts, endangered a pilot, exposed a hidden maintenance failure, and forced an entire hangar to confront what it had been willing not to see. He thought of Eastwood, Arthur, Helen, Elias. Then he nodded. "Ready." Outside, the first pale light of morning touched the wet runway. Inside Hangar 4, the engine was about to start. And if Marcus was wrong this time, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. Brooks raised one hand. "Clear." The technicians answered from their positions. "Clear. Monitoring live." Temperatures green. Vibration sensors active. Marcus stood beside the diagnostic station, headset pressed over his ears, eyes fixed on the waveform. Across the safety line, Rebecca Sterling stood perfectly still. The first pale light of dawn was beginning to show beyond the hangar doors, turning the wet runway from black to steel gray. Brooks looked toward Marcus. Ready? Marcus nodded. Ready. The startup sequence began. At first, there was only a low mechanical rotation. Then a rising whine. Air moved through the engine with growing force, lifting loose paper at the edge of a nearby workbench. Numbers populated the screens: pressure, temperature, speed, vibration. Marcus watched every one. Normal, so far. The engine settled into a steady idle. No warning, no irregular pulse. Brooks said, "Hold." They waited. Marcus closed his eyes. He listened beneath the broad turbine sound. Nothing. Not yet. Carter called from the monitoring station. All parameters inside limits. Brooks looked toward Marcus. Take it into the first test range. The engine tone deepened. Marcus opened his eyes. This was where hope had betrayed them before. The previous test had looked clean at first. Then the warning returned stronger than ever. He reminded himself not to trust the absence of bad news too early. The engine entered the operating band they had identified. Marcus watched the waveform. The narrow spectral peak that had appeared in every contaminated recording should have begun to form. It didn't. Carter leaned toward the display. No spike. Laura Bennett stood behind him. Hold it there. Seconds passed. 10, 15, 20. Marcus could hear his own breathing inside the headset. Sterling glanced toward the clock. 4:47 a.m. The engine remained stable. Brooks gave the next command. Increase to the second test point. The sound grew stronger. Marcus felt the vibration through the concrete floor. His stomach tightened. This was near the condition Captain Emily Carter had described before the first serious fluctuation. The technicians watched the numbers. Marcus listened. No double note. Brooks looked at him. Marcus raised one hand. Hold. The entire team froze at the word. Marcus leaned toward the monitor. There. A movement. Tiny. The vibration line rose slightly. Carter saw it too. Minor increase. Sterling stepped forward. Is that the fault? Marcus did not answer. 5 seconds. 10. The line stabilized. Carter exhaled. Still green. Marcus listened. No metallic pulse. Brooks asked, "Continue?" Marcus looked at the earlier flight trace, then the present reading. Yes. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Brooks moved the engine toward the condition that had triggered the warning during the failed test. This was the point. Marcus gripped the edge of the console, not because he was trying to look calm, because his hands had started to shake. The engine reached the target. Hangar 4 seemed to shrink around the sound. Everyone waited. Marcus listened for the two notes that had haunted the recordings all night. Tick, tick. They did not come. 5 seconds. 10, 15. Still nothing. The vibration remained inside limits. The narrow spectral peak remained absent. Brooks's voice came carefully. Bring it down. The engine began returning toward idle. Marcus did not celebrate, not yet. He watched the shutdown curve. This was where the double note had first betrayed itself. The turbine wound down, lower, lower. The room went almost impossibly quiet around it. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew exactly where the sound should appear. The pitch crossed the range. Nothing. Then lower. Still nothing. The turbine slowed into silence. Marcus opened his eyes. Carter stared at the waveform. Laura stared at him. Brooks looked at the screen twice, as if he did not trust the first reading. Finally, he said, "Replay the shutdown audio." The recording filled the speakers. Everyone listened. Smooth descending whine. No metallic pulse. Brooks replayed it. Still clean. Carter leaned back. It's gone. Nobody moved. Marcus looked toward the aircraft. For hours, that engine had been a riddle. Now the most important sound in Hangar 4 was the sound that wasn't there. Laura spoke quietly. The double note disappeared. Brooks checked the full diagnostic package one more time. Vibration profile normal, temperatures normal, pressure response normal. He looked at Marcus. You got it. Marcus shook his head. We got it. Brooks stared at him. Marcus nodded towards the technicians. Everybody. That was when the tension finally broke. Someone near the rear of the hangar clapped once. Another joined. Then more. Within seconds, applause rolled across Hangar 4. Not the nervous laughter from earlier. Something entirely different. Marcus stood in the middle of it and did not know what to do with his hands. Laura came to him first. She held out her hand. Marcus took it. That was good work, she said. Thank you, ma'am. Brooks came next. He did not offer a speech. He simply gripped Marcus's shoulder. Outstanding. Marcus looked around the hangar. Some of the same people who had laughed at Sterling's joke were applauding now. Some looked ashamed. One technician who had lowered his eyes during the humiliation met Marcus's gaze and gave him a small nod. Marcus returned it. He did not need them to suffer. He needed them to remember. Then someone near the back called out, General, I think you owe Reed a wedding. A few people laughed. Not cruelly, but the comment changed the room. Every head turned toward Rebecca Sterling. Her face was pale. The applause faded. The ridiculous promise she had made when she believed Marcus could not possibly succeed had finally come due. Sterling looked at him. Marcus could have let the moment crush her. He could have repeated her words. He could have made the room laugh at her the way it had laughed at him. He felt the temptation for only a second. Then he thought about Elias, about Arthur, about Helen, about the community kitchen where nobody had ever needed humiliation to know who was useful. Marcus stepped forward. General? Sterling stiffened. He spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. General, I never wanted a marriage. A few smiles disappeared. Marcus continued. I wanted the chance to do the work I was trained to do. Silence. Not awkward silence. Not frightened silence. A listening silence. Marcus looked at Sterling. That's all. Something in her face changed. For the first time all night, she looked less angry than exposed. No insult could protect her now, no joke, no rank. Marcus had refused revenge. That left only the truth standing between them. Laura looked toward Brooks. Brooks looked down at the personnel tablet still resting near the diagnostic station. Then he picked it up. General. Sterling's eyes moved to him. We need to discuss Reed's training record. Her posture hardened. Not now. Brooks held the tablet. I think now is exactly when. Sterling glanced around the hangar. The crowd had gone quiet again. Only this time, no one looked at the floor. Brooks continued. His propulsion orientation recommendation was denied. Sterling said nothing. His diagnostic workshop was denied. Still nothing. The manufacturer systems course was denied. Marcus felt the victory drain into something heavier. The engine was fixed, but the larger problem remained. Laura stepped beside Brooks. I reviewed his assignments tonight. Sterling looked at her. Laura continued. Inventory, cleanup, basic inspections, over and over. Sterling's voice turned cold. I made staffing decisions based on readiness. Brooks answered. Then the records should support that. A pause. They don't. Marcus looked at Sterling. Her eyes moved toward the people around her. These were no longer spectators. They were witnesses. Sterling said, You are all letting one successful repair distort months of command decisions. Brooks shook his head. The repair didn't create the pattern. Laura added, It revealed it. The words settled heavily. Marcus looked toward the aircraft. That was the strange thing. All night, he had believed the engine was the mystery. Now he understood it had only been the thing that forced everyone to stop pretending. Sterling's challenge had been recorded. Her threats had been recorded. Her comments about Marcus's background had been heard by dozens of people. And now the personnel files were beginning to speak too. The same way the engine had. Quietly, in patterns. Sterling looked toward the hangar doors. Morning light had finally broken across the runway. Dawn. The deadline she had used against Marcus all night had arrived. The aircraft was ready. Marcus had succeeded. And somehow, Sterling looked as though she had lost far more than a bet. Laura turned to Marcus. "You should get some air." "I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion. Marcus almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He walked toward the open side door. Cool morning air touched his face. The rain had ended. Water shone across the concrete apron in long silver reflections. Behind him, Hangar 4 was filling with low voices. Brooks, Laura, Sterling, witnesses, records, questions. Marcus reached into his tool roll and took out the old wrench. ER. The worn steel caught the first sunlight. For years, Elias's name had survived mostly inside family memory. Tonight, it had helped Marcus understand a machine. But the wrench had done something else too. It had connected two generations of people whose work mattered long before anyone powerful admitted it. Marcus closed his hand around it. Behind him, the engine sat ready. Ahead of him, morning spread across Redstone. The repair was finished. The reckoning was only beginning. By 7 o'clock that morning, Hangar 4 looked almost ordinary again. The rain had cleared. Pale sunlight spread across the wet runway. Maintenance carts had been pushed back into their marked spaces. Coffee appeared in paper cups. The aircraft that had held an entire night hostage now sat beneath the lights with its panels closed and its systems cleared for the next stage of testing. But nothing inside the hangar felt ordinary. Everyone knew something had changed. Marcus Reed felt it in the way people looked at him. Not admiration exactly. Something more uncomfortable, recognition. The kind that comes too late. Master Sergeant Daniel Brooks stood beside a conference table with 3 personnel folders open in front of him. Laura Bennett was there too, along with 2 senior officers from Redstone's command staff. Rebecca Sterling sat at the far end. For the first time Marcus had ever seen her, she looked tired. Not weak, not defeated, simply stripped of the polished certainty she had worn through the night. One of the senior officers spoke. "General Sterling, this review concerns more than last night's remarks." Sterling's jaw tightened. "I understand." The officer opened Marcus's file. Recruit Reed's technical scores place him among the strongest diagnostic candidates in his intake group. No one spoke. He was recommended for propulsion orientation. A page turned. Denied. Another. Advanced Diagnostic Workshop. Another turn. Denied. Another. Manufacturer Systems Course. The officer looked up. Denied. Sterling folded her hands. "Sure. Commanders make discretionary training decisions every day." "Yes." The officer closed Marcus's folder and opened another. "And we reviewed comparable decisions." That was when the room changed. Marcus had expected questions about his own record. He had not expected the others. One file, then another. Qualified minority personnel, strong scores, positive evaluations, repeatedly passed over. In several cases, the people selected instead had weaker technical records. The pattern reached farther than Marcus. That was the part that hurt. He had spent months wondering whether he was imagining what was happening to him. Now he understood that others had probably spent years wondering the same thing. Brooks stared at the table. One senior officer asked him, "Master Sergeant, when did you first notice a pattern?" Brooks did not answer immediately. Marcus looked at him. This was the moment Brooks had been avoiding since the story began. Not the engine. not Sterling himself. Brooks finally spoke, months ago. Sterling turned toward him. Brooks kept his eyes on the officer. I noticed Reed's scores didn't match his assignments. And what did you do? Brooks swallowed. I asked informally. And after that? I accepted the answer I was given. The officer waited. Brooks's voice grew quieter. I told myself it wasn't my place to question command decisions. Marcus watched him. There was no performance in Brooks now. No attempt to look noble. Just shame. I thought staying out of it meant I wasn't participating. He looked toward Marcus. I was wrong. The words landed harder than any apology Marcus had expected. Brooks continued. My silence made it easier for the pattern to continue. No one rescued him from the admission. That mattered. Marcus understood something then. Accountability was not revenge. It was refusing to let people hide behind the version of themselves they preferred. Sterling spoke. I never made decisions based on race. The senior officer looked at her. That determination will be made by the formal review. Sterling's face hardened again. You're removing me from command over one night? No. The answer came calmly. We're removing you from direct command pending investigation, because one night caused us to examine a longer record. Sterling went still. There it was. The real consequence. Not Marcus humiliating her. Not some dramatic punishment shouted across a hangar. Records, witnesses, patterns. The same kinds of things she had dismissed when they belonged to other people. Her promotion recommendation was suspended. Her command authority was reassigned. The leadership track she had spent years protecting was no longer secure. Marcus watched her absorb it. He expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, he felt tired. Sterling looked at him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, I suppose this is what you wanted. Marcus shook his head. No, ma'am. Her eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that? I wanted training. The room went quiet. I wanted the chance to do the job. Sterling looked away first. Marcus did not need anything more. Weeks passed. The story of Hangar 4 moved through Redstone quickly, but the changes that mattered happened more quietly. Marcus received the advanced technical placement he had already qualified for. Not a ceremonial promotion. Not a miracle. A seat in the room he should have been allowed into from the beginning. Laura Bennett became one of his mentors. She was demanding. Sometimes painfully so. If Marcus made an assumption without evidence, she stopped him immediately. If he tried to rely too heavily on instinct, she made him prove it. Elias taught you how to listen, she told him once. My job is to make sure you can explain what you heard. Marcus liked that. Brooks changed too. He did not become Marcus's friend overnight. That would have been too easy. But he stopped hiding behind procedure. When assignment lists came across his desk, he checked them. When someone said a recruit wasn't ready, Brooks asked for the evidence. Redstone introduced an independent review process for advanced training selections. Supervisors now had to document why qualified personnel were denied opportunities. Patterns could no longer disappear as easily inside discretion. Months later, Marcus drove back into Eastwood on a cold evening. Mason's Market glowed red at the corner. A bus sighed at the curb. People stepped onto wet pavement carrying grocery bags and work jackets. Marcus parked behind the Eastwood Community Kitchen. Through the windows, warm yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk. Helen Carter stood inside beside a silent refrigerator with both hands on her hips. When Marcus entered, she pointed at it. Don't say anything. Marcus smiled. I didn't. You were about to. No, ma'am. It died 30 minutes ago. Marcus set down his canvas tool roll. Helen reached for her purse. No, she stopped. I didn't say anything. You were about to, Helen laughed. Arthur Reed was seated at one of the tables with a cup of coffee. At 71, he still had the habit of watching mechanical work as though evaluating an apprentice. Marcus opened the refrigerator panel. He listened. Helen folded her arms. Still doing that? Doing what? Talking to machines without talking. Marcus smiled. Something like that. He opened the tool roll. The same flashlight, the same sockets, and the old 7/16-inch wrench, one jaw thinner than the other. Marcus picked it up. For a moment, Hangar 4 returned to him. The laughter, the silence. Laura's face when she recognized the tool. Elias's forgotten work. Brooks finally speaking. Sterling standing in a room where rank could no longer erase evidence. Then the memory passed. Marcus tightened a fitting, adjusted a connection, closed the panel. The refrigerator compressor kicked back to life with a low, steady hum. Helen clapped once. Arthur smiled into his coffee. "How much?" Helen asked. Marcus gave her a look. "I know," she said. "Worth trying. Buy groceries with it." "For the kitchen?" "For whoever needs them." Helen's expression softened. "You haven't changed." Marcus wiped the wrench with a rag. "That a complaint?" "No," she looked at him. "It's a relief." Marcus rolled the tools back into the canvas. Arthur watched him. "So," Marcus glanced over. "So? How are things at Redstone?" Marcus knew what Arthur was really asking. Not whether the engine was running. Not whether the training was difficult. Whether the room had changed. Marcus looked down at Elias's wrench one last time before placing it into the roll. Then he buckled the canvas closed. "They listen now." Arthur nodded. That was enough. Outside, rain began tapping lightly against the front windows. A city bus pulled away from the curb with a low diesel growl. Inside, Helen turned the refrigerator light back on. Someone carried a pot toward the stove. Coffee cups clinked. Dinner service continued. No applause, no cameras, no generals. Just ordinary people doing useful work in a warm room. Marcus stood for a moment beneath the yellow lights and understood what victory actually looked like. It was not making Rebecca Sterling feel small. It was making sure the next Marcus Reed did not have to become extraordinary before anyone allowed him to be seen as worthy. Human dignity had never been hiding inside a fighter engine. It had been there from the beginning. The engine simply forced everyone else to hear it. When everyone in Hangar 4 knew Sterling was wrong, who failed Marcus more, the general who mocked him, or the people who stayed silent? Marcus Reed's victory was not just that he found the fault before sunrise. It was that he refused to become cruel when the room finally turned in his favor. Sometimes the hardest responsibility is not recognizing injustice, but speaking when staying quiet would be easier. Today, think of one person at work, in your neighborhood, or even in your own family whose ability keeps getting overlooked. If you know they deserve a fair chance, say one clear sentence in their support. The sentence Marcus needed someone to say months earlier. So what do you think mattered more in Hangar 4? Marcus proving himself or Brooks finally breaking his silence? Tell me below, and stay close, because the next story begins with another ordinary person standing in a room where everyone thinks they already know who matters.